Call to order the April meeting of the Morrisville Planning and Zoning Board. I'd ask Rob Taylor to give us an invocation.
Our Father in heaven, we thank Thee for the chance to serve the citizens of Morrisville. We thank Thee for this beautiful spring weather. And we thank Thee for this town that we live in. We ask Thee to bless us with knowledge and wisdom as we work towards making decisions about land use and transportation and parks, and that we can be guided to do what's best for our citizens and be cognizant of the future that this town holds. And we say things humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Rob. Now we're going to move to item 2, which is swearing in of our new member. And Marty.
Raise your right hand. And I'm going to say, I insert your name. I do affirm that I will support and maintain the Constitution and laws of the United States and the laws of North Carolina, not inconsistent therewith. I will faithfully discharge the duties of my office as a member of the Planning and Zoning Board of the town of Morrisville, according to the best of my skill and ability, according to the laws of the God.
Congratulations, Tim.
Thank you.
And welcome.
Thank you.
Relatively painless, I hope.
There you go.
So we're going to move now to the adoption of the agenda. Have you all had a chance to review the minutes from March? Any changes or additions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from March.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from March 8th, 2018.
A second.
A motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
So just to go over one more formality, we have a full board now. And that's the board of 5 members. And we're also grateful to have 2 alternate members, Sanjay and Catherine. And you will not be voting, but you'll be participating in the discussion. Move on to item 6 with Ben.
Excuse me. Good evening. So tonight, I'm going to give you a brief update on the Wake Transit Plan implementation. So just a quick outline of the presentation. I'll give an overview of the draft FY19 work plan, overview of the ongoing studies and plans, provide you some information about some upcoming public engagement efforts, and then, of course, you'll have an opportunity for any discussion or questions you may have. So for the draft 2019 work plan, as a reminder, the transit plan has 4 big moves. 1 is connect the region, 2 is connect all communities, create frequent, reliable urban mobility, and enhance access to transit. Over the next 10 years, transit improvements will include expanding the bus service, creating bus rapid transit lines, and building the commuter rail transit system. So for the FY19 budget, which is the second year of the 10-year plan, You'll see here the revenues are expected to total around $116.3 million. And you see the pie chart on the right side of the screen with the expenditures. And you'll notice a large portion of those expenditures are going to debt reserve, which is that 41% in blue. And I think that number's actually increased a little bit since this presentation was provided. But there's a large amount of the revenues that are going into directly into reserves to help pay for some of the commuter rail and bus rapid transit, the major capital projects that'll be coming in a little bit later on in the plan. But you see the largest percentage of expenditures are going directly to bus operations in this work plan, 48%, and that's due to some relatively significant expanded bus service. One of the initiatives that will be new this year is a fare-free youth program with the goal of making transit more accessible to riders 18 and younger, and it'll allow all youth to ride free on Go Raleigh, Go Cary, and Go Triangle buses with the appropriate youth pass. And so they're working on getting that program set up now with the goal of having it ready sometime this summer to begin handing out passes to youth. For bus service expansion, you can see really the 4 service providers that we currently have there: Go Raleigh, Go Cary, Go Triangle, and then Wake Tracks, which is the human service coordinated transit. Go Raleigh is expanding. They're adding 4 new routes in what they call the Southeast Raleigh route package, and then they're also realigning and adding some new routes over in the Blue Ridge Road, Edwards Mill Road area. Go Cary, the most interesting thing for Morrisville, and that's really exciting, is that Go Cary is proposing to start a new route to serve Weston Parkway, and that'll serve Park West Village in Morrisville. And so with that, not only will we have the fixed route service from Go Cary, but then Go Cary will also be required to provide some demand response service within about, a quarter to a half mile of that area. So some of Morrisville will now fall into their fixed route, or into their demand response service zone as well.
I'm sorry, where does that go? Like, is it just up and down Weston, or does it go like to some place where you can connect elsewhere?
It'll start, all of Cary's routes pretty much start in their downtown at the Amtrak station, so it'll start there, come up through Maynard, and I think it's James Jackson, Cary Parkway, Park West Village, then up Weston Parkway, and then back down Harrison. Wake Tracks will be adding additional trips for on-demand service, and then Go Triangle will be increasing frequency and adding service hours on several routes, as well as adding operating hours at the Regional Transit Information Center. Some other FY19 investments include additional replacement buses for both Go Raleigh and Go Triangle, improvement of a number of bus stops, adding some more park and ride lots and improving existing ones, working on the design of the Raleigh Union Station bus facility. As you may know, Raleigh Union Station, the train facility, is nearly open, but then they still have to add, there's still some area they need to continue working on to bring the bus station over to that area as well. They'll also be working on a regional operations maintenance facility in Cary, and then developing strategy for some new transit technology to enhance the customer experience. One note on this, a few of these have changed slightly. The Transit Planning Advisory Committee, which is the technical group for Wake Transit, just discussed and reviewed the work plan this week, or actually last week, I guess, and have recommended adoption of it, but there were some minor changes. Unfortunately, it was only a couple days, so I haven't been able to get those changes. No major changes, just some minor changes to what exactly is being done. For example, I think the regional operations maintenance facility in Cary, I think they're not going to build it this year, but they'll start design work this year. So some minor changes like that, but for the most part, the service and some of those things are really going to remain the same. And of course, we're continuing to work on longer term investments. On bus rapid transit and commuter rail transit, as you can see, $47 million or so will be going into reserves so that when we are ready to put some of that commuter rail and bus rapid transit in place, we'll have a nice capital reserve fund to operate off of. So the work plan approval timeline, as I mentioned, the TPAC has just forwarded a recommended work plan to the Campo and Go Triangle executive boards for consideration. So beginning in really in the next couple weeks or so, there will be a public comment period opening for Campo at least, where it'll be another public comment period where folks will be able to provide public comments directly to Campo on the recommended Wake Transit work plan. The work plan will be adopted by June 30th, but the goal right now is to have both the Campo board and the Go Triangle board adopted in late May. And then some just an update on some of the ongoing studies and plans. There's work on a public engagement policy, which is an umbrella policy that will outline principles, processes, and requirements for public engagement. We're currently working on that and anticipate completion in July. There's a staffing model and expectations plan that's nearly complete. There's a community funding area program management plan, which again is important for Morrisville. And that'll outline how the community area funding program will operate and how those funds will be distributed. We're anticipating completion of that in summer 2018. The community funding areas are those areas in the plan that don't currently have fixed route service and that are eligible for up to about a 50% cost match on additional transit service through the Wake Transit Plan. So we're following that, and I'm actually participating on the core technical team for that plan, for that program management plan. We also have the bus plan, which is a portion of the overall Wake Transit Plan. That's a 10-year plan of how we're going to implement all the new bus service in the 10-year vision plan. So that's well underway, and we anticipate that to be completed this September. Then there's the Transit Corridors Major Investment Study, which is focusing on the BRT and commuter rail transit. And the initial study is expected to be completed again this fall. And at that point, we'll move from there directly into some of the detailed studies for the BRT routes with commuter rail to follow that. And then there's also some transit customer service surveys that are being worked on by the transit partners to start to get a baseline and then to have annual surveys so that they can see how the public perception, both riders and non-riders in Wake County of transit changes over time. And then finally, there's there's a spring public engagement period coming up. And again, the purpose and goals of this public engagement period is once again to continue to educate the public about the transit plan, and then gather some feedback on the draft bus plan, which will include the specific phasing of proposed service improvements in the bus network. They'll also be asking for feedback on the major investment study, primarily the bus rapid transit, looking at some potential alignments, station areas, and corridors. Commuter rail transit, we're a little bit further behind on that, so we won't be asking for input on the commuter rail transit until probably this summer or fall, but we are continuing to work towards that. Some strategies they'll be using include community meetings, presentations at neighborhood meetings, pop-up events, and promotion. And there will be some promotional video and online materials. Those will start being pushed out really late next week. And we will have the Go Triangle staff on behalf of Wake Transit will be at our Spring Fest event in May. And as of right now, they are planning to bring a bus along with them so that we'll have a chance for our citizens to actually get on and experience what a bus is like around here. Because some people may not have a good expectation of what the bus really is like here. And they're very nice. Most of them have Wi-Fi and they're all fairly new, so we're excited about that opportunity. And that's it. If the board has any questions or discussion, I'll be happy to help you through that.
Thank you, Ben. Let's start at the far end. Sanjay.
I actually have two questions for you, and these are maybe more specifics. With the Wake Tech Community Center starting, is there any plan, do you know of, that would, where you'll have bus services to and from to support the Wake Tech Community Center?
That is part of the bus plan, and I've been working very closely with the Go Triangle and the core technical group working on the bus plan to make sure that we try and get service both to Morrisville but specifically to Wake Tech as soon as possible. Go Triangle actually came back and said that was one of their priorities as well. So I think the information that you'll see in this public engagement period is that our goal is to have transit service to Wake Tech and at least part of Morrisville in the 2019 to 2021 timeframe.
Okay. The second question, again, a little bit more specific here, but do you know of any plans to start bus service from the airport to the perimeter park industrial complex, so that a lot of people who do the to and fro from the airport, they don't have to take Ubers and other stuff?
There is actually bus service to the airport now. To get from Perimeter Park, to get on that bus service from Perimeter Park, it's really peak hour service right now. But there are plans to certainly expand that bus service to Perimeter Park. I think the long range plan or the ultimate bus service plan for Morrisville does have a bus that'll serve Morrisville and then end up sort of going up Airport Boulevard to the airport. But that's probably a little bit further out, probably in the 2024 to 2027 timeframe.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Sanjay. Rob.
Questions?
Arlene.
I might have spaced out at one point, but TPAC, what does that stand for?
It's a Transit Planning Advisory Committee, and it's made up of staff representatives from the transit agencies, from Campo, Wake County, and then all the jurisdictions of Wake County as well. So we have one seat on that, which I fulfill.
Also, talking about transit, the historic signs that have gone up on Church Street now, there's one that shows in the 18-something, people could have a choice of 2 Morrisville stations to go into Raleigh by train. And I'm going, oh, yeah, let's go. 1800 and something where they were able to do it. I don't know what happened in the meantime.
Cars.
Cars.
Lee.
So the bus driver transit, when exactly will the routes be locked in?
So the general routes are locked in now. They were locked in with the plan that generally from Raleigh to Cary, along that 54 Western Boulevard corridor approximately, Raleigh down to Garner along the 401 Wilmington Street corridor, or from downtown Raleigh to Garner, and then downtown Raleigh up to Wake Med along the Newbern, or out to Wake Med along the Newbern Avenue corridor, and then downtown Raleigh up the Capitol Boulevard corridor to around Peace Street a little bit further. So those are the general corridors, and then with the major investment study, we're looking to eventually lock down which roads they'll actually use and what the actual investment will look like, what the infrastructure will look like along those corridors.
So I guess when will that happen? So the reason why I asked, I was in Charlotte last week, and I mean to tell you, it is amazing. Now, we're not going to get what they have, but it is amazing the amount of stuff that is being built along that rail corridor, because obviously, and this is not stuff they just started last week, because now that you know that it's going to be here, it is now an amenity. Now, whether bus rapid transit will really be with the same reception, I don't know. But, I mean, the sooner that can be put in, the better.
Yeah, and that's actually one thing you'll see in this round of public engagement that'll begin in late April and go through about mid-May, is there will be public engagements that will be coming out to places. There's going to be several formal meetings held and then pop-ups. But then also there will be an online survey, and as part of that online survey, you'll actually be able to see maps and choose which alignment you prefer.
I guess when will that be set in stone? I mean,
it should be set in stone towards the end of the summer. Okay. So probably in that August-September timeframe is when we'll move forward with a preferred alignment and then begin all the environmental permitting and other work to lock that alignment in place.
And that stops at Cary. It won't come out like this far, obviously, for any time soon.
Well, we are actually part of what they're terming the Western BRT long line. So it remains to be seen. We probably won't have true BRT service per se, but the BRT service that runs from downtown Raleigh to Cary will continue, has been envisioned to continue up through Morrisville. Now, whether that's 5 or 10 minute BRT service or 15 to 30 minute local bus service that is just an extension of the BRT, those are some things we'll be
You have
working
to get off
through.
and get on another bus?
No. The goal right now is that we would want that to be one continuous bus. So
Right, yeah.
maybe something like every other bus, would
Okay,
turn
so
around
some will
at
turn
Cary
around or
Station,
something,
and yeah. But we'll, those are details that will be worked out over the next year or two.
I mean, because people aren't going to build a $40 million condominium or apartment building if they don't know that it's actually going to be an amenity that's there that can serve people. I mean, that's what we're up against. I mean, that's...
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Tim. Catherine.
I was glad to hear about the free fair youth programs, and one of the things, then it may be a good source of revenue, I'm not exactly clear how much, is getting some of the corporations in Cary, Raleigh, RTP in particular, to donate money, but then we will give your employees that request either a certificate for a percentage off of a monthly pass or just a free pass like the kids. And then you get support, you get the companies that are getting pressed on hard to lower their carbon emissions. This is something they can, we did this and we feel good that we help to lower. And also it brings a lot more awareness into the corporations, but into the workers that in the buildings to what services are available. I see a bus stop outside my entrance to my building. I wonder where it goes. And it might also help to, because what I'm not hearing is there's Cary, maybe Gold Triangle is the park, but I'm not hearing how we might, how they're going to get into the park and the different major facilities in the park.
And that is part of the plan, is to have that bus service. There are several bus routes shown in the 10-year vision plan that will be shown in that bus plan that access the park in different areas. And that's one of the things that the transit plan itself it doesn't go into a ton of detail on, but we do expect the park itself to begin working on is how to then make sure that people who ride the bus into the park, if the bus doesn't stop directly at their office, how can they get to their office? And so that's actually where the park itself is also a community funding area.
Yeah.
So they'll be eligible to actually start their own transit or subsidize some increased transit through the park. And Go Triangle does have that today. They actually, for several years, they've had what they call the RTP shuttles. Yeah. And they're actually in the process, from what I understand, of stopping the shuttles per se, but turning that into more of a demand response service. And they're trying to do some different things to increase the park, folks who work in the park, to increase their ability to use transit, to get around the park and to ride transit to and from work. So Go Triangle is actively working on that.
And then again, but Cisco in San Jose built a couple of the light rail stations. Well, it's got routers and switch emblems that are just built into the concrete, but it's a well done station, but it's smack, they built them, 203 of them right in front of company property so that they would have this, ability for their employee base to do that. And then
they called it an eco-pass, and I think it was even an annual amount that the company spent, that I was able to ride any of the county transit modes, not just light rail.
Yeah, and I mean, that's certainly something I can mention to Go Triangle.
Certainly, companies that have areas of good public transportation, and maybe even some of these passes like this, will be more than happy, I think, to help invest in the community's transit system.
Yeah.
And we should get the companies to invest. And so that was my big piece. The other comment, when you mentioned that you were bringing, Cary Transit was bringing Stop to Park West, and I am glad to hear that. That was part of the original site plan approval that went through there, is that, we had kind of hoped that that area could kind of be a bus, not quite terminal, but, could have there, and then you could catch there to the airport or there to, around other places. So hopefully we can tie that in, or you can, when you go forward, to tie that in.
Yeah, and we've Cary's aware that there are a couple of identified stops or stop locations already in Park West Village. So once the work plan is approved, they'll begin working on actual route planning, and Cary staff will begin reaching out both to Morrisville, but also directly to the Park West Village management about where the buses can stop and whether they'll enter in or stay on the perimeter or whatnot.
Very good. Thank you, Ben, for making that presentation. You mentioned, I think you're on the technical committee for the community funding area.
Yes.
Does Morrisville qualify because we don't have direct routes, or?
We qualify because we're one of the only municipalities in Wake County that did not qualify were really Cary and Raleigh. Okay. So all the others did, even though they may have some level of transit service, they really didn't have true, fixed route service throughout town.
Well, it's great that you're on that committee, so we've got our voice at the table. Thank you. Any other comments for Ben? Again, thank you very much, Ben.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. Going to move on to item 6B.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to come out and talk with you this evening about our Parks and Recreation Master Plan update. This is a project we've been working on for several months, and in the last month we've had our draft master plan that has gone through several stages of review, and we wanted to bring it to you tonight because there are some specific sections of that plan that are related to things that our planning department and our UDO are deeply involved in, and things that you may be hearing more about in the future. So. But as a little bit of a background or history on the planning process with our department, we adopted our first Parks and Recreation Master Plan in 2002. Those plans typically have about a 10-year horizon or planning window, but obviously with all the changes going on in town, we've updated them a little more often than that. That 2002 plan was developed by a third-party consultant in conjunction with town staff, but our subsequent 2006 and 2011 updates were done internally by town staff only. So this year, when looking at the process, we requested to use an outside consultant, and reason for that being 15 years since our original plan was done. We wanted to gain a more objective evaluation, let a third party look at our facilities, look at our operations, and get their feedback. The John R. McAdams Company was selected by a staff committee after several proposals were submitted from different consultants. And McAdams also used 2 sub-consultants, Pros Consulting, who specialize in recreation programming in certain fields, and ETC Institute, who specializes in public surveys and analytic response or analyzing responses to those surveys. So the consultants engaged in a thorough process, public input, meetings with staff, meetings with council, meetings with our Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, public open houses, exhibits at our special events. They distributed a town-wide mail-out survey and just several different ways of soliciting information. We also extended a benchmark survey to other agencies in our region, but also in other parts of the country, to towns that we felt like were similar to us in different ways. And so the draft master plan was a result of all that work. And so that's been submitted for your review, town council review, our advisory committee, and review by the public. The plan itself is composed of several different chapters or sections, which you can see here. And it also includes a full appendix of information that shows all of our survey finding reports, all of our facility assessments, the different tabular data, mapping, and other supporting information. So that was just, in all honesty, to be as transparent as we could with as much information as we had gathered to make that available for review. So while all that information is important, and we believe every section has valuable information in it, all that data collection and everything really builds to 3 main sections of the plan, and that's our benchmarking and level of service standards, recommendations of the plan, and then the action and implementation plans for how to reach those recommendations. Some of those recommended goals and objectives and implementation strategies are supported by other departments, including the planning department, would be closely tied to several of those. The benchmarking effort included surveys from, as I mentioned earlier, 7 other municipal park and rec agencies, both in North Carolina and across the Southeast, provided comparisons in many areas, including facilities, funding, staffing, operations, but also in that process, we had comparisons to National Recreation and Park Association data for similar size agencies. The NRPA collects that information nationwide from all different size towns and municipalities, county recreation departments, and summarizes that information that we can use. And here's a list of the benchmarking agencies that we selected. We also had requested a couple of other agencies, but unfortunately they were unable to participate. But what we have are cities. We looked at a wide range of things when we selected these, everything from demographics, minority populations, household incomes, population for square miles. We tried to find as many towns that had similar characteristics to Morrisville. The level of service chart that you see here basically summarizes a lot of that information. It looks at what our current level of service is based on our population, compares that to the benchmarking agencies, and also to the National Recreation and Park Association standards. The consultants then took all those comparisons, looked at Morrisville from an individual standpoint, what's different about our town, what may be unique that would make our standard a little bit different than the others, and they gave us a recommended set of standards. And then you can see the last column there is a projected level of standards based on what we're projecting the population of Morrisville to be in 10 years. We can take just a minute to look at that. It's a little hard to see on the screen. Hopefully everyone had a chance to review this information on your own computers where you could zoom into it a little bit better. But what we have there are, red numbers for areas where they identified we were low compared to the standard, green numbers where we may have been a little bit high or equal to the current standard. So the recommendations section, the process included development of many goals and objectives, specific areas including parks, programs, operations, staffing, and finances. And the action and implementation plan took those goals and objectives and actually applied specific strategies and tactics and recommended ways to reach those goals. It identified staff groups, different departments who could focus on each one of those objectives, and then prioritize those in short-term, mid-term, long-term, and ongoing efforts. They also gave performance measures to assess progress that are being made toward those goals. And so there were a few specific ones that we wanted to review with you tonight, and then obviously ask for any input that you might have. But the specific ones were those that would also be tied closely with the planning department and affected by the UDO. First one being obviously creating a network of open space corridors that connect all the residential and civic, commercial, and other areas of town with our residential destinations. And I'm not going to read every one of the strategies and tactics, but just the ones here that you see are closely related to identifying greenway corridors, identifying ways of putting in multi-use paths or side paths to help increase pedestrian and bike connectivity to throughout town. Did anyone have any questions specifically on this one before we move to the next one?
We're ready for the next one.
Okay. The next two objectives, again, relate to developing parks and facilities. They are recommending that over the next 10 years, the town try to acquire up to about 131 acres of parkland. And so that is to meet, obviously, increasing population in town and help us provide a variety of recreation facilities. There are specific recommendations in the plan for what some of those would be, as well as feedback from our surveys of the kind of facilities that our residents would like to have. Obviously, anytime you talk about land use, that's directly related to what the planning department does. So that was one that we would be working closely with them on. One of the, major recommendations is a little bit of a change, is paying more attention to development plans when they're submitted to the town. Obviously, under the UDO, we have a provision where we can ask or work with developers to dedicate land for parks, or if needed, they have to pay a fee in lieu of dedicating that land. And so we've had land that we've been able to develop for a long time using the fees that were paid. We've developed most of that land now, so we're looking more at the land side going forward of can we acquire land from developers to increase our number of parks.
Can I ask you a question regarding that? So we are talking about acquiring land for mostly outdoor parks, right?
Yes, sir. Well, it can be used for constructing indoor facilities on it as well, but you still have to have the land to start with.
Okay. Do you have any specific recommendations where they can build indoor facilities that could be used for multiple purposes, as opposed to just acquiring land? That maybe you could have facilities that could be used, even though it is, let's say, owned by a community, it could be used by others.
Generally, you don't mix private facilities, which if they're owned by your community, it's owned by your HOA. Those typically aren't used for general public use. Typically, they're not built large enough parking capacities, large enough indoor space in order to really be able to invite general public into those facilities.
Right, but if you build, since we are talking about acquiring almost 31 acres of land that we don't have, and on both sides, right? So you almost have to figure out how do you maximize the land you have, right? And that's why I was asking the question about maybe going vertical as opposed to the current limitation where our footprints are horizontal as opposed to going vertical, right? So have you explored those options in developing facilities where you could develop, table tennis center, badminton centers that could go up, especially noting that the Asian population is going to grow as much as almost 50% by 2032, right? So while all the games that you have shown are mostly outdoor, not geared towards most of the Asian community, at least based upon what they play today, right? So have you looked at those two intersections coming together?
We have not specifically looked at those options, obviously, because at this time we're not planning any facilities. We don't have any projects starting that would be designing those types of facilities. Obviously, as we all know, with space being as tight as it is in town, any new facilities we look at, we are going to be looking at from all angles. So that may be something we would consider for, a recreation center where it's primarily indoor use.
Yes, so I would make a comment, but also ask some questions on the same subject. I mean, if we, the climate in some ways limits our ability to use our current parks at the times when the public would like to use them. Mm-hmm. For example, when you have youth athletic leagues that are outside based in floodplain areas, if it sprinkles, you can't use it, right? And in the summer, it's so dry, and we go through droughts regularly that if you use it once, there's no grass left for the rest of the year. And things like that we go through as a result of the climate. Mm-hmm. I echo, the sentiment about indoor facilities, and not for specific purposes so much, but for mixed use, flexible area and space that we can really use year round and depend on year round. Yeah. I think that would be a wise investment, a wise way for us, especially if we have parcels that are bigger today that could fit something like that. Mm-hmm. Focusing on allocating those larger parcels for that kind of opportunity, I think would be wise, on our part. The second piece of that is, the outdoor space that we're looking for. I think we can typically get the smaller pieces of land as a result of development effort, right? The smaller parks, the more neighborhood park type opportunities that we have. We can fulfill a lot of that demand through that partnership with developers, and really focus our investment in the big acquisitions of land on some of these other big picture things, and even things that bring people to our community, some of that economic opportunity that we can increase. I mean, for example, with an Indian community so large, having cricket facilities that our local citizens could use, but also could actually bring people in for events, mm-hmm. right? Kind of thinking along those lines to maximize what we can do with what we have, and even potentially get something back for that investment. So just a couple comments I had.
Yeah, and in that area for that question, I would back up for just a minute and take a look at the level of service. You'll notice at the very bottom, indoor facilities is one of the things they made a recommendation on. And at the current time, they would recommend that we try to build at least another 22,000 square feet. And over a 10-year period, up to 40,000, almost 41,000 square feet, they're recommending that the town look at options and the ability to do that.
Is that typically done in partnership with a school? So I know we use schools a lot for these, these local, indoor facilities, but
it can be. I mean, there's options and ways of working with indoor facilities. Obviously, Cedar Fork Community Center was a joint use with Wake County Schools, and so that's the current community center we have, which is about 18,000 square feet. There are other examples in Wake County of indoor facilities and school cooperatives like that, but a lot of them typically are owned by the municipality. There are some other partnership opportunities that you see from time to time with rec centers, and those would be things that we could be exploring as those opportunities come up.
Great, thank you.
Let's let Jerry get back on track, and then maybe we'll hold the questions till later.
Okay.
I know I certainly have a few. So.
All right. So obviously, that is one thing that is a recommendation that would be something that would be discussed with this group. Is instead of those payment in lieu, do we take a few acres of land from the developer instead? So, as far as facilities go, they do recommend that we work hard to establish a highest level of brand, character, and safety standards, especially along our greenway trails. And we're currently working on a signage plan for our greenways to help toward that. But anytime we talk about greenway trails, there's always the discussion and the related, it's related to transportation planning. And as you know, this year our Greenway Master Plan was tied with our transportation plan because in town, we don't have large open spaces where greenways get lost. Typically, they're going to be near roads. They're going to come up and run along roads. So much of our transportation to get connected to a greenway is going to be along streets, sidewalks, in those areas. So they recommend that we work very closely with the planning department in any new facilities, any new neighborhoods that are being built, to find ways to connect those to our greenway system. So, as far as our plan review process, we have had the draft plan posted online for review and public comments up until April 10th. That ran for 3 to 4 weeks. Out of that effort, we received about 28 different online comments were submitted. Public open house and public comment we held Tuesday night before the town council meeting from 4 to 6:30, and had a small group come in and ask questions, give us some feedback, and enter comments on our online portal. All of that information has been provided to the town council. They've had the opportunity to review it, had a work session on it, and so it'll be on their agenda for April 24th, where they can choose to adopt the plan as is, or they can ask us to go back and work on it or make any other changes that they see needed. So with that, we'll open up the floor for any other questions.
Thank you, Jerry. Let me start down with Catherine. Any questions, comments?
It's good to have the plan tied into the transportation plan. And tied into the transportation plan, as well as all these greenways and parkways tied into the Parks and Rec.
Yeah, we're looking forward to, as all of you know, if you haven't heard, the Crabtree Hatcher Creek Greenway project that we've been building for about a year. We've opened the first leg, or accepted the first leg of that, which goes from Davis Drive up to the railroad corridor. And the contractor told us all along how, they would be out there working and everybody was already using it even before it was paved. Or, they'd be building the boardwalk and people would get up to the end of the boardwalk and just watch what they were doing. It's been a very popular amenity even before it was open. So,
yeah. Tim, any questions, comments?
No questions. It's just a comment to echo the idea of looking at the internal spaces and continuing that and getting the land donations where we can. So I think that's a good plan there.
Lee.
You just reminded me, so what's the status of the bridge, the railroad bridge that's stopping that from being its full use?
Obviously, anytime you work with the railroad, they're very particular about what goes on within their area. North Carolina Railroad is actually redesigning that bridge. They're going to bid the project sometime in the next few months is what's on their schedule. Bid the project this summer, and it'll take 16 to 18 months, they believe, to finish. Now, what that project is removing the current bridge, widening the section, and then building 2 track lanes back in its place. That wider bridge will allow for the greenway to cross underneath, and they'll build that section of greenway to connect within the railroad corridor. So our contractor that's working today has stopped at the railroad easement on both the east and west side. And when the railroad's finished with the bridge, they'll make the connection in the middle. So we're expecting that to happen between now and the end of next year.
Right, so the actual work, not just the design.
Right. Yeah, okay. They're probably 90% through with design or at this point. We've given them back comments on the designs at this point, so they're kind of in that last stretch of putting their proposal documentation together and specifications.
Yes, I noticed you were saying, like they were saying, we needed 131 additional acres. That's almost 4 Morrisville community parks. Mm-hmm. So that's a whole lot of land that, obviously, I guess the thinking is that would be mostly smaller parcels, like you said, 4 or 5 acres here and there that would be spread out. They would have like a little miniature sort of playground or something, or were you thinking of a whole other park somewhere else? Or
their recommendation is a mix. Everything from smaller pocket parks that would serve an immediate community to larger tracts, if they're available. Obviously, with Morrisville, land availability is going to be limited, so we're going to have to look at what's available and take advantage of it when we can. 131 acres we know is shooting high. Okay. Right. But obviously, if you don't set high standards, you'll never get there. So.
That's it.
Arlene.
Well, I know Jerry will be glad to hear this because I've sent him about 20 questions over the last little bit. I got nothing.
Thanks, Arlene.
I was glad to see your emails. I can tell you, I believe she read every page.
Yes. Rob, any more? Sanjay.
One last question. I was this is a park, recreation, and cultural plan. And I see very little, if nothing, almost close to nothing, about cultural aspects in this plan. What are we doing about increasing cultural awareness, cultural interactions, and basically promoting more knowing of each other, assimilation of all cultures? I didn't see anything mentioned of that in the plan.
Okay. There are some specific recommendations in the plan regarding more special events, and specifically those that would highlight the different cultural diversity in town. One of the objectives that they put in for new facilities was a facility that could be used for more special events, more larger festivals, and those kind of things. Obviously, special events it was one of the highest rated things in our survey responses, and so they keyed in on that as far as offering more of those opportunities. And like I said, right down to recommending that we build a new facility primarily geared toward that.
Would we not use any of our existing facilities? I mean, we have got next to Cedar Fork, we have got all this land. We could have open door events. Mm-hmm. We do East versus East meets West events here. I mean, there is nothing stopping us from doing this without having a new building. Yeah. I mean, we have enough property along to do these events.
Yeah, and one of the other objectives that, and again, I mean, we can open it up if we need to, but I know one of the other objectives specifically was geared toward working with community partners, finding more community partners to work with for programs and for events. Obviously, when you talk about cultural activities, we're not going to know what is the most popular, the entertainment that all of the different diverse population would be looking for. So we'll be reaching out to more of those organizations to help us in those areas. So like I said, they looked at it from a programming side, recommending partnering with some of the agencies that can bring that expertise, and also from a facility side. You're right. I mean, we do some of our events now, blocking the street, doing street festivals and those kind of things. But as far as our other facilities and parks, we have some of our special events in those parks as well. The biggest issue right now is all those parks are also shared for a lot of our other programs. Special events are great, but it's hard to have those on a baseball field where you've got fences around everything. And so because we're trying to share facilities for such a variety of programs, it makes it more difficult. But those are definitely highlights and objectives that they put in the plan.
So, Jerry, I'd like to thank you again for making a presentation. I'm going to take you back to your page 57, the 131 acres.
Okay.
And
in the plan or in the service chart?
It's your 1.2, your action and implementation plan. So that's the one. So over the years, I think many members of the Planning and Zoning Board have tried to get developers to donate land and increase the green space and the open natural areas. Mm-hmm. And there's been a real pushback against that. And many developers have preferred to spend the money, so make the payment in lieu of the 1/35th of an acre per dwelling unit that they're supposed to donate. Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to be an uphill struggle to get 131 acres. And if I use the formula, to get 1 acre you need 35 homes. Mm-hmm. So you multiply 131 times 35, you're about, 4,500 homes. That's about 15,000 people. I don't think it's going to happen.
I don't think we'll get there purely on the development side.
Right.
I think we're going to have to look at some other options as well. To your point, over the years, we have had land dedicated by several developers that is in open space. And one of the things that you'll see highlighted here on the chart, our open space acreage at our current level, based on their recommended standard, we have about 28 acres more than what the standard would call for. And at the 2027 point, we would still be above on just raw open space by about 10 acres. We do have several sites in town, that we've worked with developers to get that our open space will be maintained that way, either floodplains or other areas. So we have obtained some of that as well along the way.
And then there's always the question of who maintains that and who has the the liability if somebody gets hurt on that area and so on. But
Yeah, most of it is going to be just left natural of that acreage.
that's good. Good to see. All right. Thank you again.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on to item 7.
Ready?
Ready when you are.
All right. Good evening once again. So this is going to provide a short presentation before the public comment session tonight for the draft comprehensive transportation plan update. In this presentation, I'll provide an overview of proposed modifications to the draft comprehensive transportation plan update, the February 23rd, 2018 version. Also, once again, provide an overview of the schedule for the Planning and Zoning Board's review. Public input opportunities. We'll have the public input session, and then, of course, followed up by board discussion and questions and comments. So following are some staff recommended modifications to the plan. Some of these you have seen from the last month's meeting and were in your packets. Some are new, some you did see in your packets, but note that some of the recommended modifications in this presentation are even newer than your packets because they're based on some public comment we've been receiving as we've been going out to do our community outreach. So just please keep that in mind. So you'll see here a fairly large list of some general modifications, including hyperlinks in the table of contents, adding titles to the table of contents and list of figures pages, adding the Town Hall Drive extension, which we talked about last month, which we will have on the next draft version of the plan. Again, this would not connect to 147, but it would follow up north and provide some access to some of the neighborhoods along Church Street between McCrimmon Parkway and NC 540 that currently only have access to one collector street. And this will be, we expect the design to be consistent with some direction we've been provided by RTP staff at a meeting we had with them March 7th. We'll also be revising figure 5.3 to remove the Crabtree Crossing Parkway extension label that's on that map and show the Crabtree-Hatcher Creek Greenway connections that will be constructed to both Crabtree Crossing Parkway that's already constructed and then the one that will be constructed in Morrisville Carpenter Road. And we'll just update that map to make sure that those are shown as existing greenways to clarify, to make that clear. And we'll also look at several on their figures, a couple figures in Chapter 2 and another figure in Chapter 4 to make sure that the Crabtree-Hatcher Creek and the Greenway and those connectors to Morrisville Carpenter Road and Crabtree Crossing Parkway are shown as existing greenways. No changes right now proposed in Chapter 1 or Chapter 2 other than those mentioned above. And then in Chapter 3, there's some figures that we'll be revising, including Figure 3-2. And then in Chapter 5, we need to rename some of the figures, 5-3 and 5-4, and ensure some of the project links on the project sheets match project links in Table 3-3. Chapter 4 will be adding multi-use paths that are recently installed at the Lake Crabtree apartment development. That was again requested at one of our community outreach events. And then we'll also, in Chapter 5, be revising the table and figure numbers to remove duplicates. As we've gone through, we've noticed we have 2 figure 5.2s and 2 figure 5.3s and table 5.8. So we're going to try and fix that. We're going to fix that issue. And also modify the prioritized roadway improvements table You can see there's several changes to make several intersection improvements, changing those to short-term improvements, changing a couple to midterm improvements on 54 and at Morrisville Parkway and Cary Parkway, and then changing the Morrisville Carpenter Road grade separation to long-term improvement. We'll also add a couple short-term improvement intersections, 54 and Keybridge Drive and Davis Drive and Parkside Valley Drive. And then we'll also try and get that table placed on one page so it's a little bit easier to read. It makes a little bit more sense. And then also in the action items, we'll add one which this board had discussed and we realized that it had gotten left out of this version of the plan, but develop a intersection safety improvement study program for all intersections in town, as well as evaluating the cross-section for Church Street to require 14-foot wide lanes with sharrows. And then in the appendices, we're going to take a look at all the cross sections in Appendix B and look at those right-of-way widths for those cross sections and probably revise those to make sure they accommodate all the elements without necessarily being overly wide. And then in Appendix C, we're going to add project sheets for the Markham Drive extension, Morrisville East Connector, and Southport Drive extension. Those are all collector-level extension roadway extension projects that are in our plan but don't have project sheets, and we feel that they should. So we'll be adding those. And then there's want to go over this board's recommended modifications from the last meeting. Just confirm those and remind the board what was discussed. One is trying to hyperlink terms in the text of the document that are defined in Appendix A. We did want to note that the specific terms cannot be linked to that definition in the glossary, but we can certainly hyperlink terms to the overall glossary. The glossary is only 2 or 3 pages, so it shouldn't be a lot of searching, but unfortunately with the technology we're using, we don't believe we can link specific terms to their specific definitions. Chapter 3 will be revising based on this board's recommended modification, will be revising Figure 3.3 to reflect that the recommended alignment of NC 147 in the draft CTP does not match the preferred NCDOT alignment for the project funded in the STIP. And then in Chapter 5, this board had recommended revising the prioritization of the Airport Boulevard grade separation to short term, and then revising the prioritization of the Airport Boulevard extension from West Town Hall Drive to Church Street to midterm to make those as a Phase 1, Phase 2 project. And then revising Figure 5.2 to reflect and then again revising Figure 5.2 as we revise Figure 3-3 to reflect that the recommended alignment in the plan of NC 147 doesn't match NCDOT's STIP alignment. And then Town Council has also made a couple of asked for a couple of recommended modifications that we'll be moving forward on. One is to extend the greenway proposed on the east side of Church Street north across McCrimmon Parkway to connect to the Church Street and Shiloh community parks through the TOD site, and then also adding greenway connections from the McCrimmon Parkway extension, the Phase 2 of that between Airport Boulevard and Aviation Parkway, to the greenway that's proposed along the eastern boundary of Morrisville along that Stirrup Iron Creek. And then to just remind the board of the recommended schedule, we presented the plan to you back in March. Tonight we'll have a public comment session and additional board discussion and questions. We expect you to extend the public comment session to also hold it open in May, and then in May we would expect you to consider closing the public comment session, having additional discussion and questions. Our goal at the end of the May meeting would be to have all the recommended changes and modifications you'd like to see. We would then take that back, and in June we would bring you a a new draft of the plan that you would then, that includes all the modifications we've discussed and you have discussed, that you could then recommend to the town council. And of course, as a reminder, the schedule is at your discretion. So if you decide you need to hold the public comment session open longer, or you need more time to discuss the plan, you certainly can do that. And finally, a reminder of the public input opportunities before our public comment session tonight. The opportunity one is all of our community events as part of our comprehensive engagement plan campaign. And as you see, we've already held 4 of these events, including one last night. The next one will be next week on the 17th at Perimeter Park, and then during lunchtime. And then we'll have a pre-meeting open house of Town Council on the 24th. We'll be out at the Cedar Fort Community Center during the day on Friday the 27th. And then in May, we'll be at Park West Village Concert Series on May 3rd. We'll be out at MAFC on May 7th, both in the morning and in the evening. Saturday, May 12th, we'll be out at Morrisville Community Park for about an hour and a half. And then we'll be out at Breckenridge Clubhouse on May 17th. We'll, of course, be at Springfest on May 19th. Hopefully along with lots and lots of other people. And then on May 24th, we'll be at the Morrisville Chamber of Commerce at their Coffee and Connections event that morning. And then we'll be at the Triangle Rock Club for another drop-in event on May 23rd in the afternoon. Just a reminder, you've seen this slide before, but the methods of outreach where we have used and are using include the press release, social media, our website. Hopefully you all received our postcard mailing. We have flyers. We've been utilizing our email list, and have also utilized emails to our homeowner associations and other stakeholders. And of course, we still have the public comment portal open. If you click on the Transportation Plan Update button on the homepage, it'll take you to the Transportation Plan Update page, and you click on the little train icon and you can submit a comment that'll go into our portal, and then we provide those to you. And as we move into council, we'll be providing those comments also to council. And finally, at this time, we would ask the board to consider opening the public comment session.
Thank you, Ben. Marty, do we have anybody who's signed up? Okay. Well, even if you haven't signed up, if there's somebody who would like to comment publicly on the transportation plan, please come forward. Yeah, please come to the podium there so that we can, and if you'd give us your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Scott Sullivan, 417 Airport Boulevard. I guess it was probably 2 years ago. We bought 417 Airport Boulevard, and we were looking at building a new office building on that piece of property. And when we got the fees that they were wanting because they want to change Airport Boulevard into a planted median at some time, that by the time they put the fees to it, the money got to be too much to be able to build the office building. So what we're hoping is that they'll look at it and they'll change the way they're doing it, so that if they aren't going to be doing the work at the time, that they shouldn't be charging the fees.
Okay.
I think that's it.
I think we understand. Thank you. Thanks for your comment. Appreciate it. Anybody else wish to speak on the transportation plan? Please come on up, and we usually give you about 3 minutes.
I don't think I'll need 3 minutes, but
You can tell us your name and address first, please.
My name's James Davison, and I live right on the line at 711 Keystone Park Drive, right beyond where the Church Street will probably dead end for your plan. But my concern is if you're going to build a 14-foot wide road, in reality, a lot of planning knowledge and planning documentation has stated that we can actually, in that same right-of-way, build a roadway width of 12 feet with a buffer for a bike lane, at least in one direction. And this would be more ideal and probably more practical to allow easy access for those who have parents, children, and the elderly to ride a bike to the Greenway, especially since it's right down off of McCrimmon. And I think that would be greatly appreciated if you consider maybe encouraging more of a bike lane or a actual dedicated right-of-way. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Courtney.
Yes, I just want to point out a couple of items. First, Ben Howe put on everybody's, on the dais this evening, a copy of all the handouts that are provided at the public outreach events, as well as a copy of the poster board. So the stapled items are actually our poster boards that are out there. They're all posted online on the transportation webpage, but I wanted each of you to have an opportunity to see the information that we are providing to the community. And the only other little thing I wanted to say is you will notice between the presentation that Ben provided this evening, as well as the briefing supplement, there are a few additional staff recommended items on the included in the presentation that aren't in the briefing supplement. Because those are new items that staff received after we published the agenda at some of our outreach events. And so there's going to be a few differences there, and I just wanted to note why.
Okay. Thank you, Courtney. So I think I'd like to be formal at this stage and ask for a motion that we continue the public hearing until next month.
I'll move that we continue the public hearing to the next meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And we have finished the public comment session for this evening, and we'll continue next month. So, I know I'm old-fashioned and a dinosaur, but Courtney, do you think it would be possible to get a printed copy of the changes, the staff recommended changes that Ben was mentioning this evening?
Absolutely. We can print that out and have it available tomorrow for you.
That'd be great. Thank you very much. Anybody else want?
Dinosaur.
I'll need it printed, but a consolidated,
Okay.
one pager or however long it takes. I mean, is there a page where it's all those specific ones are called out?
We can cut and paste it off the presentation, so it won't be difficult for us to put together at all.
Well, these will be incorporated to the plan. I mean, we currently have the draft 223. I'm assuming there'll be a draft 4 whatever, and those will be in there, right? Okay.
Yeah, and what we can do is, instead of putting them in the briefing supplement, we can just have additional attachment of all changes recommended to date, and that may be helpful for everybody moving forward.
Maybe just link back to where they are in the actual, in the master doc, so we can kind of go through the list and one by one just make sure they make sense to us, I guess.
We can do that.
Is that too hard?
I can't do it tomorrow.
Okay. No, yeah.
But if you will allow us to the end of next week, we can have the complete entire list with the hyperlinks mailed out and hard copies available for anybody that wants to come by and pick them up.
Sounds perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we'll plow ahead if everybody's comfortable and go to the new business section.
Good evening. I'll be presenting item number 2018-148-0. This is a request for land use plan amendment, as well as zoning map amendment for 301 and 305 Aviation Parkway. The applicant, Anand Properties LLC, is requesting an amendment to the land use plan for the subject property from the town center new supporting residential district to the town center new office and institutional area. The 2007 Morrisville Town Center plan describes the current new supporting residential district as a core town center area with attractive residential development with a recommended density of 8 to 12 units per acre. Whereas the proposed new office and institutional area is described as a town center district that will help to transition from residential development to civic and commercial uses. The applicant is also requesting a zoning map amendment to zone from residential transition to conditional office and institutional. The residential transition zoning district is meant to accommodate a range of housing choices with proximity to town center amenities with no minimum lot area requirement and typically 4 to 8 dwelling units per acre. Whereas the proposed office and institutional zoning district relates to non-residential uses with a minimum lot area of 20,000 square feet and a minimum width of 150 feet. There's additional specific standards for each district can be found in attachments 7 and 8 in your briefing packet. It should be noted that Mr. Anand has made these requests in order to accommodate the construction of a banquet facility at this site. However, if he chooses to not move forward with this project and the rezoning is approved, I just did want to remind the board that any use permitted in office and institutional district that's not included in the conditional exclusions would be permitted. About the site itself, the area of the subject property is 2.12 acres. And the current use for 301 and 305 aviation is a single-family detached home on each property. The site is near the commercial office park to the southeast at Bearcat Way, and it's adjacent to the institutional Hindu Society development to the northeast. Also, the properties across the street and to the southeast have been identified in that 2007 Town Center plan as new office and institutional area. Therefore, town staff believes that the proposed land is consistent with the surrounding uses. A traffic impact analysis was conducted for the highest trip generation, potential uses for the proposed zoning district. The details of that analysis can be found in the briefing supplement in your packet. Also, a school impact analysis was conducted for the current residential transition district. It was based on data obtained from the Wake County Public School System. Again, the details are in the briefing supplement. The proposed conditional office institutional zoning district will not impact local student population numbers. And now I'm going to turn it over to current planning manager, Michelle Stiegel.
Thank you, Elliot. As part of the rezoning, the petitioner has offered up a number of conditions. And many of those conditions are really a result of conversations that occurred between staff and the petitioner, and were offered to address some of those concerns. So I just wanted to touch base on those quickly. The three conditions being offered by the petitioner relate to uses permitted on the property, traffic impact analysis, and parking. The first one that I want to touch base on is the uses. On the overhead, you will see a list of uses that are permitted in the O&I district, the office and institutional district that is being proposed. The petitioner has indicated that they are willing to prohibit these uses from being able to be constructed on the property if the rezoning is approved. For the most part, these uses are some of the higher traffic generating uses. Were deemed to potentially be incompatible with surrounding uses, or were not allowed in the residential transition district, which the property is currently zoned. And I believe the petitioner might be touching on this a little bit more in their presentation. The other two conditions relate to TIA and parking. So as Planner Ward indicated, as part of the rezoning request, a traffic impact analysis was conducted. That analysis found that with the uses allowed in the ONI district, that there could potentially be an impact to the Aviation and Evans Road intersection. As many of you are aware, when a developer comes in with a site plan or subdivision application, they're not always required to submit a TIA or traffic impact analysis with that application. Therefore, we had the rezoning application that indicated potential impacts, but no guarantee that when the property was actually developed that a traffic impact analysis would need to come in with the actual site plan for that development. And you really need to know what's being constructed on the site to determine what the ultimate impacts would really be. So after having some conversations with the petitioner, they agreed that even if the threshold for a TIA is not met, that they will update the TIA that they did for the rezoning to evaluate the ultimate proposed use. And then subsequently, if that TIA calls for any improvements, that those improvements would be made, or they would submit a PIL, a payment in lieu of improvements. And then the third condition has to do with parking. And this was really generated, once again, from some concerns raised at the staff level. And they were really public safety related, given that Aviation Parkway is a major thoroughfare with a lot of traffic. We know that it's planned to be widened to 4 lanes. In the UDO, there are some kind of parking alternatives that are open to applicants to use that do allow off-site parking in some situations. So shared parking, valet parking, even some on-site or on-street parking allowed potentially in some cases. And once again, after talking to the petitioner, they did voluntarily agree to add a condition to their application indicating that they wouldn't make use of those off-site options. Really, we don't want to encourage people to be walking from another site along Aviation Parkway to this road. Really wanted to make sure that all the parking that the facility would need, whatever is developed on the property, would be located on the site itself. So that's kind of an overview of the 3 conditions that were in the petitioner's application packet. So I just wanted to touch on those because a lot of them did come out of some conversations with staff and were things that were offered up to address our concerns. So with those conditions in place, staff is recommending approval of both the land use plan amendment and the rezoning. And I'm going to, the reasons are listed on the overhead. Those are really directly out of the briefing itself, but I'm going to flip forward to another slide. As Planner Ward indicated, we really do think that rezoning the property is more compatible with the uses and the zoning in the surrounding area. If you look at the zoning in the surrounding area, the site is almost sandwiched between O&I district zoning, both to the north and the south, and then you have O&I district zoning and industrial management zoning across the street from the property. So in the immediate vicinity of the property, the existing uses and zoning really are more non-residential in nature. As you're driving down the corridor, I think we would also argue that once you get past Cotton Place, the Aviation Parkway corridor starts to feel more non-residential than residential in nature. There are still some residential uses. You have the subdivision on Clements and the Lake Crabtree apartments. But overall, the character and the look and feel of the area, I believe, really starts changing once you get past the Cotton Place development. So once again, we do think that the rezoning and land use amendment are more consistent with the character of the area that's there today. And then lastly, this being on a major thoroughfares typically are considered to be a more appropriate location for non-residential versus residential use because of the noise and activity associated with them. So there are 3 items that the Planning and Zoning Board is being asked to consider and make recommendations to the Town Council on. The first is a resolution regarding the land use plan amendment. The second, adopting a plan consistency review statement for the proposed zoning map amendment. And just to remind you, that's something that's required by state statute for any rezoning. You do need to make a statement as to why the request is or is not consistent with the comprehensive plan and why it may or may not be in the public interest. We did include in the briefing some suggestions as to why staff felt the request was consistent with the comprehensive plan. You can borrow from those. If you have other thoughts or ideas, just make sure when you're making the motion on that one that you do indicate why you do or don't believe it's consistent and make that public interest statement as well. And then the third item is an ordinance acting on the zoning map amendment itself. So I think that's all, Elliot, that I have in terms of a presentation. We're happy to take any questions you could have, or we can hand it over to the petitioner and take your questions later.
Thank you, Michelle. Just to summarize for me, so the land use proposal is to move it to office and institutional.
The land use plan amendment, hold on just a second, to the town center new office and institutional area.
Right.
That would be what you would change it to in terms of the land use plan. And then the zoning would be office and institutional.
Right. And so the current land use designation is what?
The current land use designation is also a town center district, and it's residential transition zoning. I think we did highlight in your packet. Let me just find it for a second.
I've got the zoning. What was the land use?
New supporting residential district, town center new supporting residential district.
So one of the things that we heard from Chair's presentation just now was that, if you're going to develop residential, then the developer has to donate 1/35 of an acre per dwelling unit. Mm-hmm. Whereas if we're doing commercial or office or institutional, there is no such dedication. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So that's one of the things that we're changing with this proposal, or that we would change.
That would be correct. There would be no parkland dedication required.
Okay, just a minor point. So I should open the public comment session and maybe give the developer or the applicant an opportunity to speak.
Okay.
My name is Danny Howell with Real Engineering. I'm here on behalf of Anon Properties. Our client and petitioner is here. If you have any additional questions, thank you, Elliot, and thank you, Michelle, for your presentation. My client and I, we originally came in with this rezoning. Again, my client's dream was to do a banquet hall facility on this property. And through several of our meetings so far with staff, getting ready for our rezoning, several site plan issues have been brought up with concerns of parking the facility and traffic and all of those items along the way. And one of the concerns my client and I expressed, or that we brought up, is we were concerned with the level of parking for the banquet hall, which is 1 parking space per gross square foot of banquet hall. And that's not typical with other municipalities in the area, where generally it's based off of the square footage of assembly space. And what my client was hoping to do with his facility is to have a large assembly space, but also have a large lobby with fountains and marble columns, and just make it beautiful, bridal changing rooms, kitchens, bathrooms, all of these things that do not generate traffic or parking. So we posed a request to consider lowering or changing it to maybe based more on assembly space, and that was considered, but they were concerned with banquet halls being underparked already. So we looked into, my client was originally looking at a 13,500 square foot banquet hall, and with the parking and everything, bringing everything back, we're getting closer to a 10,000 square foot banquet hall. And I just don't know that that's going to work for this facility. So we've been on quite a journey so far. But and my client has purchased both properties already as well. I agree with everything that Michelle and Elliot said too with the whole rezoning. I think it is definitely consistent since we have OI in direct proximity to us. The RT is more for a transition from your RNP development to aviation, and there's no access from the RNP to aviation through our parcel. So I think the O&I is pretty consistent with the current zoning and land use plan. I will be available for any questions you guys might have, and I don't know if you would like to add anything. It's up to you, or wait until we have some comments. It's up to you. Thank you, by the way.
Thank you.
Hello, hi. My name is Anand Singh. I live in Cary, 1033 Kennicott Avenue of the Western Boulevard. I have this dream project because a lot of Indian community is growing around this area. I bought this land for the community to build a wedding hall or any community service as well, serve to everyone. They like to be used. And around this area, I don't find any facilities around this kind of service somebody providing in Cary, Morrisville, around this area, because mostly people have to go to Raleigh or Durham, bigger places like Marriott and other places. So that's why I thought we can bring something in Morrisville, town of Morrisville, around the area, so people do not have to drive that far. They can use as a facilities. This is really my dream project, a very beautiful project. We try to make this one. It's like a gorgeous pieces in town. People can look at it, stop by, oh, what is this? You know what I mean? That's my dream project. If you guys try to help me, that is try to be put for the community.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Singh. Would anybody else like to speak on this? So we'll close the public comment session, and let's start with Harley. You can start in the middle. Any comments or questions?
How is this 1 floor, 2 floors? What? The building?
It's proposed as a single story, is what our original site plan for the banquet hall.
2-story.
For the banquet hall was a single story, a 1-story banquet hall. Yes, ma'am.
And going down from 13,500 to 10,000, what changes would you guys be making?
That's where, going back with my client, with the extras that he wanted to add in there with the lobbies and the bridal changing areas and stuff like that, those areas, the size and then if you get those areas in there still, the size of your actual assembly space and banquet hall becomes almost unfeasible for the project that he was hoping for.
Well, how many people, say you wanted to have a wedding with the lobby and the bridal changing and all this, 10,000 square feet, how many people is that going to be able to seat or serve? Or?
I apologize. I can't answer that specifically. I'm not the architect on the project. But again, with a 10,000 square foot gross building, you're going to be more towards a 6,000 square foot, 6 to 7,000 square foot assembly space with all of your bathrooms, lobby, a small kitchen area, and changing storage. You have to find a place to store the tables, stage, all of that as well. All of those areas, again, that do not generate traffic or parking. So does that answer your question, I hope?
Yes, thanks.
Rob. So I'm not sure how much of this is relevant to the rezoning discussion, but I do have a lot of questions about, I guess, why the site plan restrictions as is in this current zoning really, I mean, I understand maybe impacts our decision as to whether we allow the rezoning to happen, but, I would say, I guess, my instinct is to, agree that the rezoning is appropriate, but not assume that there's going to be any exemptions made for the rules we have in place for this particular area, like the parking stuff that we're talking about. So when making that decision to say, yes, I support a rezoning, that's about the area, not about some implied exemptions.
That's correct. Okay. And with any rezoning application, it's always important to look at what use could go there beyond what the petitioner is intending. Because once you rezone it, it opens it up to any use in that district. And what's really been indicated is that the petitioner purchased it for one purpose and really isn't sure at this point if that's the use, that might ultimately be constructed on the property. So once again, emphasizing the importance of looking at the rezoning comprehensively, taking that more long-term look at it. At the staff level, we think the rezoning makes a lot of sense in and of itself. We do not have a site plan. We do not know for sure what will be constructed there.
Right. And once the site plan came through, that would not necessarily be something we would participate in at that point. Any exemptions, any things that are allowed outside of the our land use guidelines, those would still be made at staff level in this case, right?
Correct. As long as what was built there was permitted as a minor site plan, it could just go through the staff review, the administrative review. If it meets the code, then move on to building permit and be able to develop.
Okay. And so can you educate us on the, or I should say remind us of the transportation plan? Was there an intersection maybe been that was planned once we moved this to 2 lanes each way? Was there an intersection accommodating somewhere, and is this a median road? I believe it is, but I just want to make sure.
Yes, and Aviation Parkway is it's a committed project.
Yep.
By it's DOT funded, so it will be a median divided roadway. There most likely will not be a median break at that location. The most likely median breaks will be at Cotton Place and the entrance to the park. And then again, either at Bearcat or at, I think it's Clements is the next one up.
Yeah. So the adjacent, I believe it's the Hindu Center. There's not a planned intersection there either. Is that correct?
We don't know for certain yet. The DOT will begin. That's a little bit later on in the process. They're still on the very beginning. So DOT will start looking at median breaks probably once they get through some of this environmental permitting. So it's probably still another year or two before we really know for certain where the median breaks may be. But generally speaking, they're going to be about 1,200 feet apart. And the starting point will be where there's already either two roads or two relatively heavily used accesses across from each other. So if you would start at maybe, the Cotton Place and Park entrance, every 1,200 feet roughly will most likely be a median break. If there's a road maybe within 1,000 feet, they may move the median break to that. But they won't necessarily provide a median break for every single property.
Yeah.
Or every single larger user.
As I would hope they wouldn't, right? And so I guess my thinking here is just trying to picture what that's going to look like, and the current interruptions in traffic that already exist because it isn't blocked. Maybe those will hopefully, I guess, go away over time as this becomes median divided. And this would all be southwestbound traffic that would be entering the property, right? Okay.
It's going to be a right in, right out.
Yep. Okay.
You're still thinking, we can come back to you.
Yeah.
Sanjay.
I don't have an issue with the zoning itself. A question maybe to the staff was, as I was reading the 2009 the plans, it always called for buildings along the roads as opposed to parking closer towards the road. Is that something that, because right now, if you look at the Aviation Parkway properties, most of them have parkings along the road, while the building tends to be far away from the road, right? Is that something is it just in the plan, or are we actually asking developers to have buildings along the road and parking hidden from the roads?
So that was an objective in the 2009 plan. There are sections in the town where there are orientation requirements to the building. Regional activity centers, town center are those areas. On this site, you would likely have the building pulled up next to the road, and then a driveway entrance and the parking would be captured around it. You're seeing a lot of buildings, Sheets on 54 is built that way. Davis Corners is built that way. So it's the changes started in 2010. There were some additional changes to our regulations with the adoption of the UDO. So you're seeing a progression of buildings. You think about the Church Street, Cotton Place development, those homes line the road as well. The thought was that the town center would start to be the gateway. So instead of having buildings far away, as you enter, that was kind of like the benchmark of our town. Okay.
So in other words, what you're saying is, regardless of whether they build a banquet or an office space or whatever comes along there, the requirements of having the building along the road will still be there.
And I don't have the the code up in front of me. Is it TOD as well as town center, I believe?
It is town center. The office and industrial district, and you can expand, only allows 50% of the parking to be located in front of the building. So some of the parking could, by code, go in front of the building, but it would be limited to a certain percentage.
Okay.
In the zoning, there's no limitation to the stories. So if they wanted the extra space, it could be a 2-story building, technically speaking.
They could. It's either 40 or 50 foot height maximum. It's different based on the use.
Okay, let's move back this way. Lee, any comments or questions?
No, I agree with the staff. I guess generally it seems like residential might not be a good fit there. So in that part, I'm fine with. I guess I'm a little leery. There's a lot of retail uses that are going to be allowed that are not restricted in the proposal. I mean, it seems like a really bad place for any kind of sort of retail, right? I mean, you have a lot of traffic coming in and out. You're only going to have right in and right out. It's in the middle of two other, zonings that are not really retail. And I guess my other question is, what exactly is this personal service or service establishment personal? What is that exactly in our plan?
I've asked that question myself more than once and gone to that definition more than once. So let us look that up.
But, that was, I guess, my main concern is, here we are opening this up. I mean, everything else seems like, it's not a huge deal, although maybe the kennel may not be super awesome for the Hindu Society next door. If a kennel went in there, I don't know that there's really a lot of demand for that.
Could you possibly bring up those uses on the main screen? Would that be possible?
Yes. Elliot, could we go back to the use slide, please? And some of the uses that are offered up as being prohibited do include a convenience store and the retail store between 20,000 and 50,000 square feet.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have a 2-acre lot. You're not going to fit a 50,000 square foot building on a 2-acre lot anyway and have any parking, and probably 20,000 wouldn't work either. Maybe it just would, but
If there are other uses that the board is concerned about, that is a discussion that you could have with the petitioner in terms of potentially amending the application further. But it does need to be a voluntary amendment on their part.
Oh, I understand. Yeah, I just, for me, I would just feel better if there was some restriction, because then I'm not exactly sure what the personal service part was. So that was kind of and I guess he sort of touched on the parking. I mean, that isn't even in the packet. So that's kind of I'm not sure that really factors into anything we're talking about. Right? I mean, there's no way we could have a condition. We're not going to limit the parking because that's a site plan deal anyway, right?
So I'm going to answer kind of two questions.
Okay.
One, so service establishment is any agencies rendering specialized services, so legal, engineering, architectural.
Okay.
And then a personal service establishment is a business primarily engaged in the provision of frequent or recurrent needed services, such as travel agencies, laundries, tailors, hairstyles, tanning, cosmetics, things along those lines. That's the difference between the two. As for your question regarding parking and transportation, the reason we're including it at this time is staff had concerns regarding some public safety along Aviation Parkway. I mean, traditionally you are correct. You do not see them, but knowing the size of the facility they wanted to build, knowing the number of parking spaces that would be required, knowing the actual availability of parking spaces on the site, staff had concerns, and that's why staff worked with the applicant to come up with those conditions.
Right. I was thinking more of the discussion we just had about the size of the assembly area and what we base the parking on. That's again not something I remember seeing in the packet, that specific sort of tax. So I just came as a little bit of a surprise that was sort of a major component of what was discussed so far.
And honestly, it's not relevant to the discussion.
Okay. That's what I was thinking too.
On the beginning in their pre-application process, the question was asked, would the staff consider amending the code? Once it was really moved on to me, and I was asked the question, after looking into it further, their answer is no, staff would not recommend it, because during the UDO process, banquet facilities were discussed specifically, and we came up with that calculation. We have two existing facilities inside. One where parking was problematic continually, and that was under old code. Under the UDO code, we have one that's been built, and we have not received any complaints about the parking on that site. I've driven by it midday; it's full, it's being used, so it doesn't appear to be overparked when I've driven by it. So, in my opinion, it would not be wise to amend to allow a user to build a facility when we know what's currently working is working.
Right, and that was my question, was whether that had even been considered. I imagine it had been, that you have interstitial space that you don't use. That's got to be accounted for in the calculation. So,
okay. Tim,
just a quick question for clarification. So these owner carve-outs that they're doing on use, they apply to the property in general, so transfer of ownership, does that still apply, or is that will that open it up thereafter?
It would run with the property. So with a conditional rezoning, you start with the base zoning district, which in this case is the office and institutional district, and then you could modify that some. So this would actually, if approved, show up as conditional O&I and be linked to an ordinance with specific additional restrictions that would apply just to this site and that would run with the property.
So in that case, it would be my, I think, opinion as we look at conditional approval on this, having, like it's looking at all these uses and saying, do those uses fit into the town center plan, right? And judging it for that, and still expecting staff to enforce the UDO at any site plan approval process, right? And not make any kind of concessions for the UDO inside of this conditional approval. That would be my, I think, preferred way of going about it.
Well, the conditions exclude things, and quite frankly,
I don't think a gas station is in the town center.
Or excluding a heliport, I don't think is a really big exclusion.
Right. So. And so I'm happy to see those there because it's still, it conforms with the town center plan of why we had this whole area put together anyway, right?
But the town center plan was residential transition, which still has a residential component.
Yeah.
Now, Cotton Place didn't perhaps follow the spirit of what was intended back in 2009 because of certain economic conditions. But we are where we are. So
I would also say, I mean, the office use is in some ways hinted at in the town center plan, is it not? Of being, walkable, kind of a small town feel, even for that matter, a barbershop, which you're talking about personal services. I mean, I think those are still things that we could see there and still could conform to the town center plan.
Exactly.
So I don't know, just.
All right. Thank you. Catherine, we haven't given you a chance.
Yes. In terms of permitted uses and uses that the applicant has offered up as they would be prohibited, when I've gone through the list of uses, I had concerns about many of the telecommunication uses, in particular collection of antennas, a tall antenna, whether it be a concealed tower or a non-concealed tower, and that's not what the intention for the area could be, and it is something that we could run into as a difficulty. And then, so that was really my only use concern, and it wasn't all the use in telecommunications. My other question is more hypothetical. I know this is a conditional rezoning and we don't have details, but under the UDO, would a facility such as this be allowed to have parking on top of the building or underneath the building as a parking facility?
They could do a parking deck. That is permitted.
So parking deck implies a separate structure, but I'm talking about parking structure and building use built together. So like some apartments, you drive down underneath and you can park, or you could drive up on, have essentially the top deck of a parking where it's open, but just that's what it is, over the top of the building, which would of course be engineered appropriately. So is that sort of parking allowed, especially if it cuts down on hardscape, percentage of hardscape for the entire design?
Yes, it would be, and you kind of hit on that. If it was, engineered correctly, obviously they would need to meet building codes. That kind of parking is very expensive, but it is something that would be allowed. I did want to touch for a second on your concerns about the telecommunication as well. Obviously, that's something.
I realize that it's offered.
With the petitioner. From the staff level, I think one of the reasons that we didn't raise that with the applicant was a lot of times you see these kinds of facilities in addition to another use. It isn't the sole use of the property itself, but there's a building with some use in it, and then also a telecommunication facility of some type on that same property, which in some cases brings in additional revenue for the owner.
Catherine, were there any other items? You conscientiously went down those list of uses. I appreciate that. Was there anything else that you thought maybe we should raise as something that we might ask the candidate to exclude?
Well, parking deck law as principal use you didn't have in red, but that was not.
And maybe Lee, you want to chime in too, because I know you looked at that.
I think actually that some of the proposed uses, like the group living would be an asset there, or some of the smaller buildings. We're not in the airport relay yet, so like, daycare. Well, school won't go there, but even, big hospitals not going to be hard to get, but some urgent care and doctors would be. So yeah, most of them really I don't have an issue with. It's just using the property solely for
telecommunications.
Yeah, for big antenna. And I was thinking if you drive down Cary Parkway, down when you get to Lone Pine, and there's that gas station at the corner with Lone Pine, and they put in a big antenna right behind it. I'm not sure if it's on the gentleman's, on the people's, on the property, or if it's the next property over, but...
I think it's a concealed antenna, and that's in a dip.
Yeah, well, you come down it.
Yeah. But in this case, I think you've got the antennae that are on the parks, the public works.
Yeah. Right, so that could be the case.
Yeah.
And something like a broadcast studio or station, I thought, well, that's okay. But then there's needs to be antenna, but I don't want to see an antenna farm.
Right.
But again, this is all you have to offer this. This isn't anything that we can demand.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine. Any other comments, questions on this one? So are we ready to consider this? And it's going to be a complicated motion, but we've been given a cheat sheet, so that's I hope.
I think I'm off the hook this time.
What's that?
I think I'm off the hook. Who's up for a complicated motion?
And we do need 3 separate motions.
Yes. Yep.
And we can't just reference this and say by reference. We have to read it out.
There's a short stop, but it's not that short. So do I get the general sense that we're in favor of this? In which case, just need somebody to step up to the plate. Some of these experienced planning and zoning board members here.
We don't have to make all 3 motions at once. Can we kind of spread them around?
That's a good idea.
And I think it'd be good for, our newest member to have one of them. I'm just saying.
Well, Peter's always been so good over the years at rewording my motions and making them far more eloquent and really getting to the meat of the matter than what I came up with on the fly.
Well, thank you. But in this case, I didn't even have to do that because it's written in.
We have a cheat sheet.
It's here. So, and it has to be verbatim in order to meet the general statute. So.
Okay, I'll go first.
Thanks, Arlene.
On the land use plan amendment, I make a motion. I hereby recommend that the Planning and Zoning Board recommend approval to the Town Council of Resolution 2018-148-0A pertaining to the amendment of the land use plan for property commonly known as 301 and 305 Aviation Parkway and located on the northwest side of Aviation Parkway between Clements Drive and Bearcat Way for the Town Center new office and institutional area. Land use plan 18-01.
Thank you, Harleen. Do I have a second for that motion? I have a motion and a second. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any opposed? So that motion is carried. So, motion number 2, which would be the consistency statement.
I'll do it.
Thank you, Lee.
Okay, I'll make a motion to.
That.
How do we? Where do we?
Think we make a
I
motion.
motion that as required.
As required.
So we have to say, okay. So I make a motion that we approve that as required by the General Statute 160A-383, the Planning and Zoning Board finds that the requested zoning map amendment is consistent with a comprehensive plan and is in the public interest because the Town of Morrisville 2007 Town Center Plan identifies the land along Aviation Parkway and directly across from the subject property as new office and institutional area and is suitable for office and institutional uses. And the new office and institutional area is designated as a town center district that will help to transition from residential to civic and commercial uses. And as the subject property is adjacent to commercial and office and institutional uses, rezoning from the residential transition zoning district to the conditional office institutional zoning district will help maintain and enhance the distinctive character of the communities outlined in the Town of Morrisville 2007 Town Center Plan. As a result, the zoning map amendment is consistent with the Town of Morrisville's adopted plans. In addition, the requested zoning map amendment is compatible with existing uses surrounding the subject property and result in a logical and orderly development pattern. Therefore, the zoning map amendment is reasonable and in the public interest. Therefore, I hereby recommend that the Planning and Zoning Board recommend approval to the Town Council of Resolution 2018-148-0B pertaining to the adoption of a plan consistency review statement for a proposed zoning map amendment for property commonly known as 301 and 305 Aviation Parkway and located on the northwest side of Aviation Parkway between Clements Drive and Bearcat Way to the Town Center New Office and Institutional Area, REZ 18-01.
Thank you, Lee. So I have a motion. Do I have a second to the motion?
Second.
Any discussion of that motion? If not, all in favour say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. So, Tim, how would you like to jump in on your first?
Is there stuff on the back now?
Yeah, there is. Okay. Do I make a motion to
recommend that? That the Planning and Zoning Board recommends.
Planning and Zoning Board amendment. Oh, okay. That I hereby recommend that the Planning and Zoning Board recommend approval to the Town Council of Ordinance 2018-140-0, approving the zoning map amendment for the property commonly known as 301 and 305 Aviation Parkway, located at the northwest side of Aviation Parkway between Clements Drive and Bearcat Way of the Town Center, new office and institutional area, REZ 18-101.
Thank you, Tim. Very good. So I have a motion on the table. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on that motion?
May I? Am I allowed to?
Yep.
Could we make a consideration to the motion that town staff and developer look into some of these telecommunication? I'm certainly not asking you to, but if they're willing to offer any of that up, that it should be, please, taken care of by the time it gets to town council.
So we have two ways of doing that. One is to just make that note and rely on conversation, or we could ask Tim to amend his motion and add a request that town staff explore with the developer whether they would consider excluding the telecommunication facility.
Yeah, told you was good at that.
Is that something we can do?
Can I address her concern or her question?
Okay.
As far as a standalone communications tower, or anything like that, the size of this property is so small. Like I said, you wouldn't be able to have any pole of any height for fall radius around any of our areas. So I didn't see any restriction from that side. And then the same thing you said is, if we did go with a different use and had a building or a multi-story building, and there was some kind of communications in the building, they could have a small tower, and you wouldn't want to restrict something being on top of the building, but you're not going to have a standalone cell tower or anything like that on the site. It's just too small for a fall radius. So I didn't want to restrict it any further for any future potential use.
I think the land's too expensive too, right?
Yeah, well.
I don't know if that helps. I hope it does.
I hadn't considered the fall radius, so that's an interesting point.
If the current owner and applicant were to buy the piece of land next door, or somebody new come along and buy the piece next door with the other residential house, it's got more land in the back, and then he makes an offer that the current owner and applicant just can't refuse, how, and the new or current owner decides they want to make one, they want to combine the plats, okay, so that they have a bigger area to which to build. How does the zoning for these two plats get rolled into a third plat, and then once there's they're combined, legally combined?
It doesn't. So these two lots would continue to be zoned conditional O&I if in fact that is approved, and the property next door would remain residential transition. You could consolidate it into one lot with two different zoning districts. That gets a little messy. My suspicion is that if someone really wanted to develop something on these two properties and the adjacent property, that they would likely be coming in to look to rezone the whole thing to the same zoning district.
Yeah, that would be, I would assume that the third piece would get rezoned, whether or not it went for conditional rezoning or not, but if it's, or O&I versus O&I.
But that would, if it was rezoned, that would need to come through you.
So you comfortable with what we've heard from the applicant? Okay. So I don't think we need to ask Tim to modify. So the
If I could, for a moment, just a kind of minor point of order. I think in the motion, maybe lost track a little bit there on the last line in reference to the land use plan instead of the conditional O&I district.
Let's re-motion that.
Yeah.
We need to re-motion that last segment,
I think you also said 140 instead of 140.
According to the land use plan?
Just restate the motion.
Oh, restate.
Yeah.
Okay, so making a motion to hereby approve the zoning map amendment. I hereby recommend the Planning and Zoning Board recommends approval to the Town Council of Ordinance 018-148-0, approving the zoning map amendment for the property commonly known as 301 and 305 Aviation Parkway, located at the northwest side of Aviation Parkway between Clements Drive and Bearcat Way, to the town center, new office and institutional area. REZ 10-01.
18-01.
18-0.
Oh, 18-0.
okay. And the seconder is comfortable with that? All right. So I have a motion on the table. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Do we need to take a 5-minute break, or are we okay to plough through? Let's keep going. Thank you to the applicant and the engineer. Thank you.
The items that we have may take a little bit of time, so 5 minutes may take maybe 40.
So we'll take a 5-minute recess. Courtney.
Okay, so there's 2 items listed on here, but I do have additional 3 items that I do want to quickly cover. And I'll probably just fold them into 11.1a. So 11.1a is our monthly newsletter of development activities. In the month of March, there were 2 new combined site plan construction drawings submitted. The first one was Bainbridge Aviation Crossing, which is the multi-family development on Aviation Parkway. This is a rezoning that was brought to the board, several months ago. It's across the street from the Lake Crabtree Apartments. Same developer is proposing to build apartments on all these other corner of the street. Also was submitted was the Morrisville Aquatics and Fitness Center. They are demolishing the existing tennis courts as well as the existing pool facility and are constructing a new indoor pool facility, expanding the parking and then reconstructing 2 of the 3 tennis courts because that's all the room there is with this larger expanded indoor pool. Site plan, there was on 6001 Recruitment Parkway, a medical office park was approved. There was also a site and conditional construction plan approval for the Morrisville Solid Waste Transfer Facility. This is a special use permit, probably 18 plus months ago. And then a conditional construction plan approval was also issued for the residents of Shiloh Crossing. And that is the multifamily development that amended their special use permit up in Shiloh Crossing area in Walmart. There were not any town council approvals related to planning in that month, but we did hold a transportation fair. And for any of you that were able to attend, it was a great event. There was a great amount of turnout. And really, I know Ben has left, but Ben, in coordination with our public information officer, coordinated the event. If it weren't for the 2 of them with their outreach development materials, the event would not have been nearly successful. And then all the content and the maps created at that event were both Brad West and Dylan in our department. So a lot of hard work and a lot of kudos really need to go out in that direction. Excuse me. One item that was presented at Town Council this week was an expansion of our ETJ boundaries. There's only 2 areas that are eligible for expansion. One is near Kids Creek. They're approximately 35 acres, but a significant portion is actually located in the existing Triangle Parkway right-of-way. The other portion is located, and it was 61 acres, next to Breckenridge. And once Lewis Stevens is extended, the parcel will be cut in half into 2 pieces. So they're actually going to be substantially smaller. 540 is also part of that area. Future Lewis Stevens will be part of that area. And there's some significant environmental constraints. But those are really the last 2 areas that the town can truly expand into. The general process is council considers the request. And if they so desire to have the boundaries of your ETJ expanded, it goes to Wake County Boards of Commissioners. There are several committees there that is heard by. Their planning board reviews it as well. It's about a 5 to 6 months process. There's actually a formal public hearing that's held at the Wake County level. We did have an informal one. It wasn't required by law, but we did hold one this week, and several residences came out and spoke about the expansion. If Wake County so desires to allow us to expand our ETJ, it will come back to the town, and then we'll have to go through, at a minimum, a rezoning process for those 2 parcels. And if the designation of the zoning ends up being different than what our land use plan currently states it should, a land use plan amendment would be required as well. So it's more just kind of a heads up in case you hear something about it. But ultimately, if Wake County does grant our request, it will be brought back to this board as well. So that was the other reason I wanted to bring everybody up to speed. Does anybody have any general questions?
So the Kitts Creek is still within Wake County, right? The ETJ extension around Kitts Creek is still in Wake County.
Yes.
Right. So we're not being ambitious and trying to take over Durham or Cary.
No. So both of these areas are identified on Wake County's plans as Morrisville's short-range urban service areas.
Where's the parcel exactly? Kitts Creek one.
The Kitts Creek one? If any of you happen to know where former board member Esther Dunnigan lives, she is the very last house on the right as you go from Church Street to Davis Drive. Before you cross over 147, it's all the land that basically surrounds her home.
Oh, okay. So it's the one north of Kitts Creek Road.
Correct.
Okay. What about the property that Mr. Stam owns? That's south. Is that already in Morrisville, ETJ?
That is already in Morrisville, ETJ.
Okay. Gotcha. I didn't know Esther lived there. I love that property. It's a nice little place. And then the other one you said was Kitts Creek. Is that bordering up into where Lewis Stevens would be extended?
It's Breckenridge. And
Sorry,
the end of Breckenridge is a parcel on the far western side of Breckenridge, right next to Northwest Park. So if you find where the Northwest Park is, it wraps it on the north and the west side of the park.
Northwest side of the park. Still on the east side of Lewis Stevens.
Lewis Stevens, if you were to kind of draw an arrow straight north, it goes straight to the middle of the parcel.
Okay, but the Lewis Stevens extension, which would go under under 540,
It goes through the middle of that parcel.
so it's both sides then. Okay, that whole area. All right, got it.
Where is that in relation to the proposed school?
Nowhere
The
near.
proposed school is on Little Drive.
Yeah.
So the proposed school is further to the east.
They're not connected.
I thought
They're
I
not.
read that they were going to be accessed through.
Once Lewis Stevens is connected, so for E50 or Parkside Elementary, the carpool entrance is on Parkside Valley Drive, and the bus entrance is off of Little. So once Lewis Stevens connects to Little Drive, that will be an opportunity to enter the site through another location without having to go to Davis Drive.
But that's a good way west.
But yeah, the properties are completely separate, though.
Yeah.
That's the property we're talking about right there.
Yeah.
And that school is going over here, or somewhere in there.
We're expanding.
Gotta get it before Cary does.
And these were owner requested, I assume?
No, this is staff's recommendation to council. We have reached out to the property owners 3 times prior to even starting the process. We did not hear from either property owner. We have now spoken to both property owners. One has yet to receive any of our mailings and public notices. The other one was more curiosity as to what was occurring and didn't express any opposition to or really any support of. They were fairly neutral.
So with us pulling it in potentially, is there an advantage to the landowner?
The advantage is you will have access to water and sewer.
They would get that then, okay.
We will rezone it so that anybody who wanted to develop would have the rezoning in place. The ultimate advantage to the town is we have better control over what's going to happen to impact those neighborhoods.
Sure.
So currently the zoning is R30 in Wake County. It allows townhomes, it allows single family, it allows gas stations.
In R30?
Permits some construction debris landfills. So after really evaluating potential impacts to those neighbors, staff recommended in order to best protect and keep that community character that it would be wise if we made this request. Now, ultimately, if somebody wanted to develop it and they wanted access to water and sewer, they would end up coming to us anyway and annexing the property. But if you have a site that could, through well and septic, develop, they would not ever need to come to Morrisville.
Okay, so could, but technically not really feasible for like dense townhomes or something like that. Okay.
I guess the
Thanks for the explanation.
But the property owner will have to now pay Morrisville additional taxes, right?
No, so we're not going to annex them. We're just putting them through the ETA, so they will still pay their Wake County tax, as in both those in and outside of our ETJ. They will continue to pay their fire district tax. So anybody that lives in our corporate limits does not pay a fire district tax; they pay a Morrisville tax. But they will continue to pay the fire district tax. The only thing that may potentially happen is when we rezone it, it can trigger some reevaluation of the property, which could impact the county value. But that's hard to determine, at this stage. And ultimately, it's what we rezone it to. So if it went from R30 to medium density residential, most likely would be a change in tax value. If it's R30 to very low density residential, the odds of it start decreasing because very low density residential has a larger lot size requirement than R30. So it's a comparable zoning district.
But staff would recommend that zoning to be matching the current use, I would assume?
Staff is recommending that it match the adopted land use plan.
Okay.
Since really our authority is to promote what council has adopted. However, if the property owners wanted something that was generally consistent with the area, which really only leaves some residential zoning districts, staff would support that as well.
I think it's we're opposed to this medium density or whatever matches, but we will support you if you do very low density to keep the valuation current and
So we
similar.
can't control the revenue, but we would be more than happy to support a resident that wanted very low density residential.
Gotcha. All right.
Good. Any other topics, Courtney?
Yes. So the two other topics I have is just a quick reminder, if you did not turn in your land use plan homework, to please do so as soon as possible. And next month, the outreach for the land use plan update will start. You'll receive a mailer in the mail, so just give them a look on that. And anybody that you talk to, pass the word along so we can have them participate on the front end as we develop the plan. And the last item is the historic walking loop trail. So this project was actually started by my predecessor, Ben Hitchings. He ordered the trail signs before he left and had them put together. And we were just waiting for the funding to build the sidewalk. The sidewalk is built, so we have now internally developed a map. We have also developed some QR codes and recordings of storytelling that will go along with these displays, one of which I believe the Vice Chair saw out in the field. So some of them have been installed. We're also installing some benches. There's at least one bench that wasn't near shade, so we're installing a tree near it. So hopefully this will be finished fairly soon, and then we can have a ribbon cutting ceremony to highlight our first of what we'll hopefully be many historic walking loop trails in Morrisville.
Great news. Good.
So just one long ribbon that just goes around the whole thing?
Yeah, so you're going to hold both ends. We'll find a very strategic photo opportunity site, I'm sure. I do not have anything else, so I'm happy to move on to the next item.
So, Michelle.
Going back to the Morrisville Aquatic and Fitness Center, do you know when do they propose to start it, and typically how long would it take?
I don't know off the top of my head.
That's
the plan review process can take 4 to 6 months, and then you're going to go off to bid. But I don't know the details. Typically, Parks and Recreation has project sheets for all the projects that have.
But this is a town project, right?
Correct. It was through bond referendum monies that are helping to build the site. And just for anybody who's not aware, the link on the bottom of these will take you to our map online that will give you more information about any projects listed on here.
really went through the new handbook section by section at the last meeting. We believe that we've made the changes that you requested. If you have any additional comments, recommendations, items you want to discuss, let us know. At the staff level, there were 2 additional items we just wanted to touch base with you on quickly. Going back through and making the changes, Courtney and I had different notes on the end time. So it is in the handbook as meetings ended no later than 11, but in the standard notes indicated that you wanted to be 30. So just wanted to confirm that with you, and then one other item that we need to touch base on.
I thought you said 9:07.
I second that.
It makes you tell you, a little on the aspirational side there.
We could split the difference, 10:45.
Sometimes we need more time. I think keeping it at 11, if it's in the hand.
Yeah, we can always waive the
keep it.
cutoff. It's not like it's set in stone, right? So, I mean.
Right. I think we just wanted to make sure that we had accurately reflected what you had asked for, and since we had different notes, just wanted to touch base. We're happy to make it whichever time you'd like.
Okay, I think we concluded 10:30, but I don't have any issue with 11 either. So, do what is, let it work for you and keep it that way.
The written copy I have says 11, so
Yeah, I was thinking 11 too, but also.
I mean, is it recorded or anything? Oh.
We've listened to the minutes, it's my notes. I was like, let's just double check.
11 is fine. I think everybody would agree, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just leave it at that. Yeah, I've got enough work to do anyways.
I'd rather not end at 10:30 with 30 minutes worth of work and have to come back again.
Yeah, right.
And you could just vote to extend it. I mean, that's.
Yeah, we're done.
11 it is.
We could leave it in as 11 then. The other item had to do with the roll call vote. There was some discussion about that last time, but we didn't see that there was a specific request to change it, but wanted to circle back with you on that as well. I know it's not something that the board is doing now. I would say that it is relatively standard procedure. However, with the thought being that if all of you are voting at once and saying aye, we really can't affirm that each and every one of you spoke of it was part of that vote. And so what that would mean would be that the secretary would call each of your names one by one, and you would vote in favor of or opposed. So that would be a change to your current procedure. And since there was discussion the last time, wanted to circle back before we did leave that one in. Once again, your call. We're happy to go either way with it.
Can we just raise our hands when we say aye? I mean, that would sure make things go faster.
Just keep them up like that. Aye.
I mean, I don't know. I mean,
I remember in the past, if a nay came up, the naysayer wasn't, I mean, you kind of knew, but then Chairman Pritchard and the note taker would, or generally Chairman Pritchard that said, okay, well, we have 4 against, or 4 in favor, and, Mr. Smith is against, 4, is against. And so that we had it clarified at the time.
I think what we talked about last month was that in that condition, if 3 of us said yes and nobody said no, then technically 2 of us were saying no.
yes, that is correct.
And you have to have a quorum, and so if you don't have a roll call vote and every voter accounted for, you don't know if you had a quorum.
Yeah. No, you have a quorum by who's sitting here.
Yeah, but if only one person says yay and nobody and everyone else doesn't say either,
then that's 4 no's.
I think just
Exactly.
sticking up the
But all
hand
you heard
is
was
the simplest
yeah.
way to do it.
Right?
I will add that last night we had training with the Board of Adjustment, and the town attorney ran that training, and it actually was over procedures of a meeting, and he recommended, and he did preface this was, his professional opinion is when you vote, even if you're saying yea or nay, you should always hold your hand up with your vote to make sure that it's properly being recorded by the secretary to the board. He said that way everybody's vote is clearly being counted and clearly being noted. So that was his recommendation.
I think that's a good recommendation, and we might add, if it's unclear, then we'll have a roll call vote. And only in the exceptional circumstance we want Marty to call us out by name and say, did you vote this way or that way?
I don't think anybody on this panel will have an issue voicing out their no. But if they are not, they are going to call it out.
But legally, we have to have a quorum. We have to have majority accounted for votes.
We won't hold a meeting unless we've got a quorum, so we wouldn't get to a vote unless we've got a quorum.
I think it's more
the quorum is over once you start.
Yeah.
You just have four
What
against
am I trying
and one
to say
in
here?
favor.
I'm saying you have to have a certain number of votes for it to pass.
Right.
And if you have 5 people voting, you have to have 3 votes for it to pass.
Correct.
Right? Well, if you have only 2 people who say yay and no one else says anything,
then there's 2 for, 3 against, and it doesn't pass. And then you would have to probably do the roll call.
She can't tell that.
Yeah.
Sitting there just listening.
I think well, that's why the hand. Yeah. Talk to the hand.
So we hold the hands up, and then we wait for you to say thank you, and then at that point everything's accounted for. I mean, is that fair? Does that make it simple enough?
I mean, plus it'll be on video too, right? Or is it video or just audio?
We're on audio.
Okay,
right
darn.
now. We're not on video. And that's part of the reason, because we're on audio for anybody listening to the live stream. If we don't have your roll call, well, experiences, we can't see your voting at the end. They do not know definitively. However, I would argue the point that the record will show that when the minutes are adopted at the next meeting.
Do we live stream these meetings?
The audio.
The audio gets live streamed over the web?
Yep.
It does,
yes. So we can hear all your comments, Catherine. They are recorded too.
This is the reason I send out email reminders so often to watch your microphones, watch your phones. If you have them on vibrate, don't have them.
Yeah, that was literally in that last email.
Up next to the microphone, they will pick up everything. Your microphone should be on at all times.
It should be on and not turn it off.
Personally, if from a legality point of view, if you need to do roll calls, please go ahead and do it. I mean, it takes 1 minute or less. So, whatever works.
How does the majority feel?
I don't want a roll call unless it's necessary. I just, we've done, when I hate to fall back on, so far so good, we've never had any issues.
We'd be happy to amend it to indicate voice vote with raise of hands.
Okay. I'd agree with that.
And then just leave the option for the roll call if there is any confusion as to.
Right.
Anyone that you didn't get a vote registered for, you could say, Mr. Langston, can you please repeat your vote? I mean, is that easy enough? Okay. I mean, is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, you're the recorder, so we will make sure it works for you.
So those were the 2 things at least we wanted to circle back with you on. Did any board members have any other items with the handbook you wanted to bring up?
No.
Then our plan would be to make these final changes, and then with the next agenda packet, we will give you a finalized handbook, and then there'll be a form to sign acknowledging that you received it and read it.
Sounds good. So on to the next item, which is board comments, I think.
Oh, that's it. That town council remote participation rules. Is that something that we were supposed to discuss, or?
That's something that came up as a question at
remember
the last meeting, if remote participation would be allowed. A majority of the board at that meeting didn't appear to be in favor of amending the handbook to allow remote participation, particularly because you have alternates that could sit in. But just for informational purposes, in case you wanted to revisit it.
I agree. I mean, I agree with that still. I just want to make sure that was what we were still at.
Okay, board comments. Tim, I'm going to start with you. Your opportunity to raise anything.
No comments, just thank you, and happy to be here.
Very good. Catherine. Lee.
No comments.
Arlene.
I'm good.
Is that enough?
Andy.
I'm good.
Okay. I was going to ask the two participants who went to that UNC training what you thought of that and whether you'd recommend something like that in the future. Arlene and Lee.
Yeah, thank you guys for making it available. I was expecting, honestly, for it to be a real yawner. I thought, I'm going to take one for the home team. But
Lovely kind of mixes things up a little.
He's pretty good. I recognized him immediately from the videos that we had watched.
But it was great. It was great to be with other planning and zoning people and talk to them. And the material was very useful, very informative, and I really appreciated and I think there was something in the future. I know I'd want to go.
Very good.
Yeah, I thought that was useful as well. I mean, just, it was a good topic, and then, it was interesting to hear from people how they do things in different places.
Good. Item 14, I think we can skip item 13, so who'd like to make a motion on item 15?
A motion that we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor say aye with your hands, please.
Aye. I should have voted no just to throw things out of whack a little bit.